Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Arvada City Council meeting for today, April 22nd, 2025. Ms. Rush, if you'll do, or I'll call upon a moment of reflection and pledge of allegiance for Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
Thank you, Mayor. On this Earth Day, let's take the time to have a moment of silent reflection and think about something living in your life that brings you joy. And now join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Apologies, we had to add a bit of a business meeting to a normal workshop night, so I got thrown on the order there. Ms. Rush, now if you will do the roll call.
Mayor Simpson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
Here.
Councilmember Ambrose.
Here.
Councilmember Davis.
Here.
Councilmember Pfeiffer. Councilmember Marriott.
Here.
Councilmember Rupert.
Here.
Councilmember Davis.
I move that we excuse Councilmember Pfeiffer from tonight's meeting.
Thank you. All votes are cast. That passes 6-0. Councilmember Pfeiffer is an excused absence. Thank you very much. I will open public comment for this evening's agenda. I have one person signed up so far. That is Ms. Joyce Richardson.
The city leadership for including the police immigration policies in the Arvada report. So thank you for that. I would also ask that a Know Your Rights tab or an Immigration Resources tab be added to the city website. There are excellent Know Your Rights cards, and I ask that these be visible at every office or counter that our residents frequent. I'm happy to get a supply of those to the city manager for distribution if that's necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in chambers who would like to give public comment at this time? Seeing none, I will close public comment for this evening's agenda and open it up to new business. The one item of new business this evening, and that is discussion and/or action regarding the city manager candidate finalist. So I am very pleased to announce to all of you that after interviews with 3 absolutely tremendous finalists who all brought their A game and were just great, the City Council has decided to move forward with making an offer to Deputy City Manager Don Wick. So with that, I invite my fellow council members to share any of their logic on or thoughts on the process before we move forward with instruction to negotiators. Councilmember Rupert.
Sure. Well, I'd like to start with the comments. I thought all 3 of the candidates we interviewed this time around were well qualified, and some came really extraordinarily well prepared, even though one candidate was from out of state. Otherwise, really brought their A game, did an excellent job. So I want to thank the other candidates for their participation and the time they spent with us. But honestly, Mr. Wick, his experience, his dedication to our community, experience in various roles within our community, all of those things really made it a very simple decision for me, and so I'm grateful for Don, you're applying, and the time you took to spend with us.
Absolutely. You know, it was an incredible process. I know we did a national search, and sometimes you have to go far away from home just to come right back again and realize that, kind of like a little Dorothy Gale, your heart's in your own backyard. Mr. Wick has incredible relations with our team. He knows our city, all of our partners, and just the feedback we received from the public, from our city team, was phenomenal. And to see that kind of elevation of one of our own was just really tremendous. So congratulations, Mr. Wick. Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll echo Councilmember Rupert's comments. We had 3 really fine finalists, and it was great getting to know them and going through the interview process. And I'm very supportive of our decision as a council, Mr. Wick, and I'm very appreciative of your passion and commitment to our community and service that you've shown over the years. And I know that we've got some big challenges that we're working on and we'll have ahead that we don't even know what they might be yet. So I look forward to working with you on that, and I will, my hope is that you will provide some bold leadership that we need at this time. And those challenges, are wide and varied, from financial, sustainability, to things like climate change and homelessness and all the many things that are affecting our community. So I'm really looking forward to working with you and working on that bold leadership that we so badly need. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other member of council would like to share? Councilmember Ambrose.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I think, the first round, we only had city managers, so deputy city managers couldn't apply. So the second round, I was very glad Don Wick applied, and the 3 candidates were excellent. They all presented on the same issue, and I just felt that your plan, Don, was hyper-responsive to what our community actually needs and has been saying about these issues, and the fact that you have such a great connection in our local community made it very clear that you know where to take Arvada for the dream big and deliver motto that we have around here. So I was very impressed and put you at the top ranking for that.
Right. Councilmember Davis.
I know that Dawn knows where all the bodies are buried. Congratulations, Dawn.
All right, so with that, once we have a contract negotiated, it will be brought to us at the May 6th meeting for a formal council vote. And with that, we will be moving on, but that closes our new business. I want to thank you and congratulations, Mr. Wick. We look forward to getting that negotiated with you. All right, we have 2 workshops this evening. The first is going to be our waste hauling program workshop. Ms. Rhodes, do you have this item? Welcome.
Well, good evening, Council. Thank you for taking the time with us tonight to talk about our solid waste program. I have the team supporting me here. I have Chris Gray, our business manager, Debbie Baumgartner, our utilities services manager, and our attorney, Jessica Morales, who have been helping prepare for tonight's workshop. So we'll just cover a brief timeline of where we're at and what our process looks like. We want to start by recapping what we heard from you during our March 4th workshop to make sure we're on the right track. One of those things that we did here is we wanted to see some additional comparisons with other utilities, so we've brought forward that data for you to see tonight. And then we'll present some options. Republic has proposed a couple options for us related to the minimum service fee. We'll talk a bit about what we're seeing in terms of our pricing and our proposed changes to the city program fee, and talk a little bit about the fund balance before we wrap up and next steps. So broad timeline tonight, as I mentioned, we really want to review what we heard last time and give you those options for consideration. We have reserved the May 13th workshop timeframe to bring back any information that you'd like to see. And the plan right now is to June 3rd request adoption of a resolution, including amendments and fees reflecting what you would like to see, with the July 1st effective date. So let's begin with some of the recap from last time. We did hear from you that we wanted to maintain some of the existing competitive pricing within the current contract. And what this looked like is we do have an additional 2 one-year amendments that are the city's option to continue to renew. And we heard that there is interest in doing that because of the competitive 3.5% cap on increasing our rates. I put the caveat in there that knowing that HB 22-1355, the producer responsibility, is going to impact those rates in the future. And so what we see coming down from that program, if there's a change required, obviously we'd want to incorporate that into any future amendments. So if this is correct, what the teams are prepared to do is begin working on what that next contract bid looks like. And that is about a 14 to 18-month process to prepare the adequate scope of what the council would like to see in that contract, work to advertise, and then transition any services to potentially whoever that's awarded to. So to ensure that our systems are prepared, our teams are prepared, and the customer doesn't experience any disruptions, again, we want to make sure we're planning adequately for that. So if we continue through the full renewal periods with Republic, we'd start preparing for the next advertisement in the first quarter of 2027. We also heard direction from you that we wanted to keep the minimum service or opt-out fee either the same, or if there are any increases that are proposed, we'd want to look to distribute that to existing trash service customers. We did not hear that you want to increase that or eliminate it entirely, but that's what we've really focused on to bring you some options tonight, and Republic has given us 2 options that satisfy this. Some other things that we heard, again, producer responsibility. What are our teams doing to monitor what's happening, and how can we be prepared to incorporate those savings into our contracts or into those rates? We're continuing to track that closely so that we can be prepared to act. We also heard that bulky item events, of one of which we have coming up this Saturday, we want to make sure that that's really focused on just city residents. And so we're really enforcing strongly ID checks, making sure that teams are trained and making sure that that's happening. So that'll be an emphasis during our events. Also, there were some questions around other additional discounts that our program participants could they receive, either on specialty pickups, composting, roll-offs. Again, that's not part of the program today, so we wanted to clarify that. A few other themes that we heard and that we'll be speaking to later in tonight's presentation. Seasonal yard waste, curbside collection, and composting. What are our options there in the existing contract? This is a finding in the Waste Diversion Action Plan, and we'll talk through some of those recommendations and what we already know. Similarly, with how do we increase program adoption rates? How do we really incentivize and increase participation in our program? Again, another key finding from the Waste Diversion Action Plan that we'll start to talk about more. And of course, I already mentioned this, we heard a desire to see more rate comparisons, and we'll bring forward those charts in the data for you tonight.
Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
Thank you, Mayor. So I understand we have one slide on the waste diversion plan, so I'm going to ask to excuse myself during that short part of the presentation. In full disclosure, the organization I work for was a subcontractor with the state working on this for the city of Arvada, so I will remove myself for the, I imagine it will be a very short amount of time, but please come get me when it's done.
Are you sure? Please proceed, Ms. Rhodes.
Thank you. Well, we are excited to share that we were able to complete this plan and submit it to CDPHE. And so I just want to provide a project update or some key highlights. We can plan to bring you back additional details of the implementation plan and some of the actions, but I wanted to at least share some highlights with you tonight. And these are some of the key recommendations. There's, of course, supporting strategies that are also outlined in the plan, but here are the 4 key ones that were emphasized in the plan. Increased single hauler participation in our program. And a lot of the steps around this option involve additional engagement, outreach, comparisons to what others are being offered from a pricing standpoint, and to potentially even some options to require HOAs to participate as their contracts with their existing haulers expire. So those are some examples of what are outlined in that first recommendation. The second recommendation is to require pay-as-you-throw for all haulers. So again, really marketing this as customer choice around pricing. And while we provide this through our program and some other haulers provide this, the idea or the strategy here is that the city would require all haulers operating within the city to provide this. The third one is focused there on curbside seasonal yard waste collection, but the idea is that this could also lead to piloting of organics or food scraps collection. There's a couple of different ways we could do this. Again, it's being responsive to what we've heard from our community in terms of interest to adding services. And we'll be prepared to talk tonight about some of the challenges of adding those services to our current contract, but we can either advertise for additional contract, we can look to add this in the future contract renewal, or we can do some drop-off locations or have some other strategies to how we can start to advance this item. And then the fourth is to support multifamily and commercial recycling. Again, some of this might just be looking like further engagement and outreach, also some drop-off locations. And so the table summarized here outlines those 4 strategies, along with some high-level qualitative criteria around what is the impact to waste diversion rates, high, medium, or low, what is the relative cost to the city to start to take action on those items, what is the timeline for implementation, and ultimately what are the greenhouse gas reduction potential of those options. So that's just a high-level strategy, and we can bring back more details and information for you.
Mr. Marriott.
Let me ask you a couple questions on these, and maybe a challenge here. So I see that, one of the couple of the things here. One of them is you want to increase participation in the city's program, which would be decreasing participation in the free market. So you'd like to take some from one supplier to another supplier, and it says that would have a medium greenhouse gas reduction, and I don't follow. If your trash is being picked up, how having your trash picked up by somebody else means you create less greenhouse gases because they're picking it up the same way the other guy's picking it up. What's the difference? I mean, who came up with this, and are these actually true and actually tested?
That's a very good point. Thank you for bringing it up. I'm not prepared to speak about the modeling that was done tonight, but I'm happy to bring you some of those answers and even bring the team back to present more details on this. I'm sorry that I don't have that for you tonight.
That's okay. I just want to, since it's a workshop, I want to put that out there for further discussion. I mean, it's one of those things that, to me, it defies logic to me. That doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong, but I guess I would have to see more to that. The second one is to require all haulers that operate in Arvada to charge or to have a pay-as-you-throw model. And I wonder, what's the point there? What's the idea? Why would you do that? What does that? How does that improve anybody's life?
Sorry. The reason that you would go with a pay-as-you-throw program is you would offer smaller bins, and those bins cost the residents less, and then thus increase the probability that people will be recycling.
Okay. But if I was a hauler that operates in the free market, it doesn't necessarily cost me less to offer a smaller bin. And so I wouldn't necessarily have to offer a lower price to a customer.
You are correct. If we were to implement the pay-T program to all other trash companies that do waste hauling, it would cost them money to be able to have bins to provide customers in different sizes, as far as, communication out to the public about what their program does and what the costs are.
Okay. So let's say I was a hauler that chooses to operate here and take advantage of that slice of the free market that still exists. And I say, okay, fine. I'm going to offer a 90-gallon, a 92-gallon, and a 94-gallon, and I'm going to charge $21, $21.50, and $22. Does that meet the requirement that I'm operating in the pay-as-you-throw program?
I think it would have to be stipulated, especially the language prior to implementation, to make sure that it was comparable to 95 or 96 gallon 65, or 64 gallon or 35, or 36 gallon containers.
So you'd be talking about wanting the city to more heavily regulate the free market. Is that the idea behind that?
As I understand it, yes.
Okay. And the goal of that more heavily regulating the free market would be to what?
To incentivize ultimately recycling and make it mandatory for other haulers to have different sizes to, with the expectation that they would be increasing recycling. Another way you could go about that would be to try to change and get the HOAs in the program in order to increase participation.
Right. But that's recycling's already mandatory, correct?
Yes, it is mandatory, yes, if they've got residential service. But the whole pay-as-you-throw program is that you offer different sizes. They get a cheaper price for having a smaller container, and thus they're really forced to use their recycle bin because they don't have enough room in the trash can.
So you try to reduce somebody's trash can to the point where you're going to force them to recycle more? Is that the goal?
Ultimately, that is the goal, yes.
All right. Could it also have the effect of chasing some of the haulers that service the slice of the free market that's left in Arvada, chasing them away, thus accomplishing that first goal, which is increasing participation in the city's program?
Absolutely, it could potentially do that as well.
Is that one of the goals?
I would say no. No, the goal is really to increase recycling and sustainability within the city of Arvada.
Okay, and so tell me this, what's the city's motivation to increase recycling and at what's the goal? I mean, if you say we're going to put regulations in place to increase recycling, you must have a goal that we're going to increase it from this to what?
There are several goals listed in the sustainability report. I'm not sure if you want me to speak to that or not, or, okay, so, yeah, the recycling, some of the research shows that the commercial multifamily houses maybe are only recycling about 18%. The city itself, with those in the program, is about 17%, but they'd really like to bring it up overall, the entire city, to about 16%.
Okay. I guess, thank you. Thanks for answering the questions. I appreciate it. Thank you for that. I'm just going to make a comment here and just say, if I were the chosen hauler here, this is exactly what I would want. I would want, I've been successful in capturing 2/3 of the market, but I'm missing that stubborn third. And they seem to be pretty stubborn, pretty hard to get. I mean, the needle's barely moved in this time, and there's certainly a lot of hard feelings. One of the ways to try to get the rest of that market is to offer better service at better pricing, more flexible, more meets the need of customers. The other is to make it harder on your competition, to harm your competition to the point where they can no longer participate, and you kind of get them by default. My comment just is, I don't think that's the role of the city. I think the city government should not do that. I think, look, the city council in the past had vigorous public debate for a long time on this issue. There were compromises reached one way or another through whatever process it was that has left us with this limited free market approach that the city has, where there's a city program that matches city programs all over the city, and there's also an option for those who want to avail themselves of the free market. And that's decision has been there. This smacks of trying to undo that long, painful, debated public process to, grind this into an authoritarian, here's what you will do program. And I don't think at this point that is the right approach to go. I think if the council wants to do that, the council ought to take this issue up as we would like to eliminate the free market in the city of Arvada and take that possibility away and have that debate with the public and take that issue on. But doing it this way is, to my look, the wrong way to go about it. Turning the screws a little bit at each opportunity to harm the free market portion of the market to the benefit of the non-free market portion of the market. Just doesn't seem to be the right thing to do, and I think as a council, it would be bad acting for us to decide that that's the way we're going to operate on this issue. So thank you. Thanks for the comment. Thank you very much for answering the questions, too.
Yeah, thank you. And I'll just add that we're happy to schedule a separate time to dig into this more and receive your direction, provide, again, more context. We'll share with you the report, and we'll prepare some additional materials to share with you the details of the findings here, so that way we can receive your direction on it.
Thank you. Councilmember Davis.
Thank you for all this information that you've compiled. I certainly do appreciate the work that's gone into this. I will agree and must agree with Councilmember Marriott. This requiring the pay as you throw, this just increases the costs to our customers across the city. And right now, the way the economy is going, the phone calls I've been receiving is, why are you raising costs now? Right, there are some haulers that pick up no matter how much you put out on the curb. And now you're telling them now they have to pay a fee to, to increase, maybe they have yard waste, they have just things that they're putting out because trees have been harmed during bad weather, and we're not having a place where they can take them. If the city wants to have a single hauler, say so. But this moving about like this and pushing out other small businesses, there are small haulers out there, this is what they're doing. And this is their bread and butter, and it is a small mom and pop or less than 100 employees that are picking up trash in the city of Arvada to very faithful customers. So adding these costs with very little medium to low rate of return, I think is irresponsible on our part. And why are we writing what businesses do? Why are we trying to push our values onto other businesses? I think that is something we need to think about. If composting is very important to somebody, that's great. But if you have two people like my husband and I, and we eat out all the time, composting it's meaningless to us. I have neighbors who put all the time, fill up their recycle can with trash. So when you tell me that you want to reduce recycling, unless you have somebody going out flipping the lids and looking through these trash bins, which I've noticed the Republic does not do, they just dump them into the trash, that's defeating the purpose, correct, of meeting your goal of recycling. I just feel like this is increasing costs to our customers, and overall, I'm a little disappointed that we're making other haulers do this. I mean, I have a 96-gallon cart, and I don't fill it up all the time, but when we have yard waste, we fill it up and have some bags on the outside. The hauler doesn't charge us for that. So, and I do feel like we're pushing out other operators unfairly. Again, if we want to do a single hauler, let's have that conversation and move forward. But if we want to make sure that we keep business and secure small business in the city of Arvada, which is what we say all the time, that we want to support small business or even large business in general, I think that some of these recommendations don't support what we're saying out of one side of our mouth. So thank you for that, Mayor.
Councilmember Ambrose.
Thank you again for this presentation. I wanted to go back a slide where the question, or two slides, where the CAN Public Program participants receive discounts on curbside pickups, composting, and roll-offs, and the answer is no. That was my question, so I'm just curious why, if people are paying a minimum service fee, they don't have access to those other fringe benefits.
So if they just pay the minimum service, they have access to our bulky item and our leaf events, but they don't have access to Republic Services large item pickup at your house, which they pay an extra fee for. You actually have to have trash service at your house in order to be able to enable that feature, just as you would with if you've got a different trash hauler and you want them to pick up a large item.
Okay,
The
so,
roll-offs are not, those are strictly posted for the city's large item and leaf events. So they're not at a discount to regular citizens throughout the community.
right, and so my question is, in the negotiations, could we ask for that?
The negotiations are pretty clear that based upon the index rate, that they're capped at a ceiling of 3.5%. So it's not like we can really negotiate that amount. They're paying a lot more to operate business within the city of Arvada than what they get to increase to run business here.
Okay, great, thank you. And then going back to the slide that we were discussing before with the 4 different key recommendations, some comments I have is that for the increased participation in contract hauling, I can see how that would be a reduction in greenhouse gas because you would have a more efficient pickup of the same hauler picking up the bins instead of multiple haulers coming down the streets, which is also the wear and tear on the roads. And so just like it's more efficient to have your groceries delivered because it's just one truck going and delivering all your groceries instead of a whole neighborhood going to the grocery store and getting their groceries. It's the same kind of concept where you have less emissions because you have a single hauler going in and collecting. Although I'll be interested to see if my theory is right on this when you share more information. And then on the second strategy of requiring all haulers to do the pay as you throw, I think this is a great idea. Right now, when I had a larger family living at my house, I had 2 trash cans and 2 recycling bins, and there is really no incentive to reduce that because it's only like $5 more to have an additional however many gallon can. Whereas if we restructured it to a pay-as-you-throw program where we're really trying to drive consumer habits to have less waste and do more waste diversion, then having even smaller containers available than what is currently in the program would incentivize people to be like, one way I could save money is to not have so much stuff to throw away. Then I could have smaller programs and increase recycling. And I feel like that's what you're trying to get at here. And that's why the greenhouse gas reduction is so great, even though it doesn't really cost the city that much. Because it will help people realize that you can't just throw trash away infinitely. It costs money to do that, and you need to be more responsible about your resources. I also think the free market is working pretty well because what we've done as a city in saying that we do have a single hauler program because the minimum fee reflects the fact that we did go with the single hauler program. The city already agreed to do that before I came onto council, is that that we came together as a city and had servicers bid. And we collectively said, here's how big the market is. Which one of you can give us the best price? And not only did we get a really great price, we got a lock-in on a contract at 3.5% in a time of historic inflation that we want to keep. And this benefits people who are in the program, who are able to keep their costs low with the trash, and people who are not in the program who are calling up servicers and saying, hey, I have this minimum fee. Can you beat the rate with the minimum fee? And a lot of haulers are. So it gives us a bargaining advantage in the free market as a collective and for the 1/3 who aren't participating to keep costs down and be a huge benefit to our Arvadans. So I really appreciate the forethought that the city had in negotiating and getting this benefit and working with the mechanics of the free market to say, hey, let's all pool together our resources, our bids to be able to get the cheapest price possible. Businesses do that all the time. You don't order just one of something, you order 10,000 because you get a bulk discount when you order things like that, or you have a lot of customers. It's the same free market philosophies at the same time, but we are working and coordinating together. So those are the comments that I have, and I think these strategies, especially the ones that are, all of them are low and medium cost to the city, should be implemented, and I think will enhance services and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and the wear and tear on the roads, which was 2 of the hugest reasons why I think the city wanted to implement the single hauler program that it has.
Councilmember Davis, you want a second bite?
Yes, thank you. So some of the calls that I've been getting is this is a fee as a tax. They would have preferred that, and this was the first go-round where you stayed up until 3 in the morning listening to public comment, was that voters should have had a chance to vote on this issue and not have been told what to do, especially those folks who had good prices already with their haulers. And so what we did was we drove out a major hauler out of Arvada. And I think that is the opposite of the free market working. And so I think that's a thought that I would like to put out into the ethosphere, is that this, if we wanted a single hauler, we should allow voters to vote on a single hauler, or we should have negotiated on a single hauler, pushing everybody else out. I was not for this in its initial stages before I was on council, and I was merely a voter resident, and this is still my feeling.
Councilmember Davis, I just wanted to make sure if you had any questions about the fee versus tax issue, that I'm able to answer those. If that is a question that, okay.
But thank you, Ms. Morris. This was just comments that were made to me from voter residents in the city. This is how they were viewing this program.
Okay, so it's
Thank
just that
you.
viewpoint. Because we did do an immense amount of research from the
Yes,
legal
ma'am.
perspective to make sure that legally it qualifies as a fee, but if there's any questions and you need to refer people to me, I'm happy to take on those questions.
Thank you, and I appreciate that
Thank you.
opportunity.
Thank you. So I will say I was the new council member when this all happened in 2019, 2020. So this was my first big battle, my first war scar, if you will. And just having been here, just to Councilmember Davis's point quickly, 2/3 of public comment were in favor of a vote now rather than going back out. And so, that was one of the things we had to weigh at the time. And it's really hard when the community is that divided. It was quite the hard issue, I will say. But ultimately, the public opinion as it was given to us was fairly clear in one direction. And then I will also say that we didn't know it at the time, but it's quite fortuitous we passed it when we did. If we had tried to go to the ballot later, it would have been disastrous because the next year was 2020 and we had a pandemic on our hands and inflation hit us quite hard. So circumstances worked out in our favor, though that was an unforeseen thing that came about. So with that, to these slides, go back 2 slides quickly. I just want to comment quickly on bullet 3 here. Can program participants also receive discounts on curbside pickups for public composting and roll-offs? No. Program participants in the City of Arvada program can receive discounts on bulky item pickup, which is curbside pickup. So that looks questionable, I think, to the average voter. It should be $15 an item, correct?
So it's not a discount. They pay a set price. I believe it's at $16.16 this year, and they just need to call and prepay for the item to be picked up. But as far as an actual roll-off that they order, they don't get a city rate.
Okay. It's not a discount, but compared to the free market, that's a whopper of a discount. So it's just the semantics of it, but I just wanted that to be clear as we present it to the public. We have a specially negotiated city rate for curbside pickup at 16 some odd an item, which if you're having a couch hauled away for slightly under $17, that is a steal of a deal. So just wanted that noted, but thank you for the note about the roll-offs. Moving forward back to the 2 slides, the pay-as-you-throw, most of my comments were actually asked by Councilmember Marriott, so I thank him for elucidating much of that information. I, too, am uncomfortable with the idea of regulating pay-as-you-throw for all private haulers. I do note that there is a couple of haulers, they set their business model, they remain competitive in the city, and I can respect that. I don't want to disrupt private business models. We have pay-as-you-throw, which provides, what's the smallest, what's the rate for the 35-gallon?
The rate for the 35-gallon currently is $12.70.
Right, so a household can get recycling and so a senior living at home
Yeah.
or something like that, a single individual can get, for $12, they can get trash and recycling. So that's a fairly competitive rate, I would say, for any taker. I don't want to punish those who don't want to avail themselves of it, but I believe we have highly competitive rates, and I'm pleased for that. And the ability to add extra bins and whatnot, which is what my household does. But in terms of these other items, I remember back in 2020, so for those who don't remember, I used to represent District 2, which is Councilmember Ambrose's district. That is the eastern side of the city with the older lots, the big trees, the lots of leaves. And so I recall, you know, my constituents at that time, many of the conversations I had dealt with a lot of folks who had, frankly, a ton of trees, especially those old cottonwoods. And our program did not make sense for them, so they decided to stay with a private hauler and pay the minimum service fee, specifically because of seasonal yard waste. And there was not a solution to be found for it at the time. So the ability for us to bring seasonal curbside yard waste in, I think would be huge for a lot of those households who find themselves in that particular situation. So my comment is that I would love to see that one particularly prioritized, as well as multifamily and commercial recycling. I know we don't even allow multifamily buildings to be able to come into this system, correct? That is correct, correct. So the option for them to not have to deal with that would be great. I'm sure there's not an apartment manager in the world who wouldn't love to have one less thing off their plate that's managed for them, that they don't have to worry about. And then increasing participation. So for folks, again, some historical context, the reason HOAs were exempted was because they had long-term contracts, sometimes five-ish years longer. That takes a long time to unwind. And I remember the conversations from senior council members at that time discussing a future possibility of bringing HOAs on board as their contracts unwound naturally. Councilmember Ford, in fact, was a huge proponent of it, as was Mayor Pro Tem Miller at that time. And so I think it's worth revisiting, not as a let's go forward, but it's definitely worth exploring, recontacting, re-engaging with our HOAs to discuss bringing them on board. I can imagine we've had several HOAs come on board over the last several years as they've decided to get this off their plates. So it would be interesting to be able to speak with them and see what they have. And personal comment, every single one of them has single hauler, and they don't allow competition. So this would actually increase consumer ability in those neighborhoods to be able to select the hauler of their choice, as opposed to not being able to have that option because of their HOA. So, Councilmember Davis, final bite at the apple?
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify we are the city, Republic is the trash hauler. So I want to make sure that we understand and decouple when we do when we talk about we're talking about the city. We don't have the seasonal yard waste collection. Republic doesn't have the seasonal yard waste collection. I want to make that clear to the audience, that we are not managing that, and we are not, that's an operational decision for Republic.
Forgive me, it's not in the contract because we didn't negotiate it in. Was it not an offering, or was it just simply too expensive for the cost of the programming?
It's not currently in the contract.
Okay, all right. Are there any other questions about this slide? Come. All right. So shall we bring back in Mayor Pro Tem Mormon, who was out there far longer than I think he thought he would be? Did you have a nice break?
It was longer than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Please continue.
Okay, so this next slide just gives you an idea of what the current costs are to have service or without service in our program. You can see that for a level 1 service, which is a 35-gallon cart. A recycle bin that's 95 gallons, you pay $12.70. If you go up to level 3, which is a 95-gallon trash cart and 95-gallon recycle, you pay $21.55. If you're opted out of the program, you're at $6.05, and if you're in an HOA, you pay $1.50. The next slide that you'll see here is the minimum service opt-out current fee comparison, and you can see that Arvada is at the lowest. We're actually at $4.55, where Louisville actually charges $22.91.
Councilmember Marriott.
Let me ask you a question. So I see you've got 6 cities on here. What would be the minimum service fee in Wheat Ridge?
I didn't actually research Wheat Ridge.
Wheat
so
Ridge
I'm
does
not
not
sure.
have a program.
Okay.
That would explain
So
why.
if we added some other surrounding cities on here like Lakewood and Wheat Ridge and Edgewater and Littleton and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, they would have, as a minimum service fee, they would have 0, just to be clear.
I actually live in Littleton. We don't have or outside of Littleton, but we don't have an organized program right now, so it would need to be compared to.
That's the point he's making.
Yeah.
Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
I was just going to say it's not apples to apples if you include those other cities, because this is those cities that have contracts.
Yeah. All right, the next slide is 95-gallon cart comparison. You'll see that North Glen and Thornton are on the low end. They are the 2 cities that do all of their services in-house. You'll also see that Golden, Lafayette, and Louisville all have composting. Their pricing is a little bit higher. Please note on the Broomfield cost, $19.43 is listed. That's actually for a 65-gallon cart with recycling. Their 95-gallon cart cost is $29.93 and should be listed before Golden, which they pay $31.94. Edgewater is the closest to us at $21.50.
Councilmember Marriott.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out with this particular slide that this slide really depicts what happens if you make composting mandatory. It's not an option that you pay for if you want it, but if you make it mandatory and stick it on everybody, the price doubles or more, and I think the council needs to keep that in mind when they start thinking about this in the future. One of the decisions the council will have to make is, if you're going to have a composting program, is it for those who want to participate, who subscribe to it only, who pay for what they get, or do you apply it to everybody across the whole system? And if you do, what's the consequence of that is? And I just want people to understand the consequence of that is, given by this chart, at least 50% more, in a lot of cases 100% more, and in some cases 200% more, 150% more. It's a significant price increase to apply composting to every address, and I just want to make sure the council is careful when and if they take that up, and to please do this the right way, which is, if you're going to offer a service that people would like to take advantage of, that they pay for that service that they get, and that you don't require other people who don't take advantage of that service to subsidize those who do.
Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
I just want to point out, too, while we're talking about cost, that $40, that was what in Arvada the open market was before we did our program. So just to show the impact of our program is having is lowering our prices. So I did want to bring that out.
Councilmember Davis.
I will have to respectfully disagree with Mr. Mormon. My costs for waste hauling, recycling, I was recycling before. My waste hauler no longer is in Arvada. However, my costs have not gone up dramatically at all. They've actually stayed the same, and we are at or less than Arvada. If I didn't have to pay for that $6.05 or whatever it is now, that $6 fee, I would be less than Arvada's costs. So I have to disagree with you respectfully.
Sure. Councilmember Marriott.
Yeah, and I'll agree to that too. I provide trash service not only for my house, but a dozen rental houses, and I never paid as much as the Arvada program is ever in my whole life, having provided trash service to people for nearly 40 years now. Never once have I paid that much. So, I think perspective is everything. It may have saved some people money. I'm glad it did. For those who were able to save money by taking advantage of the city program or the free market, I think that's a really good thing for them to do. But there are people out there, and I'm one of them, who this has cost us more money. It's made it more expensive, not cheaper.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so the Republic proposal. So the current contract defaults to a July 1st, 2026 expiration with 2 additional one-year extensions, the city's choice. The current contract applies a 3.5% increase to all Republic fees, including the minimum service opt-out fee. Republic has proposed to hold the minimum service fee, the opt-out fee, on their end, which is $4.55 per month, if the city extends the current contract either to July 1st of 27 or July 1st of 2028. So like we talked about last time, the 3.5 maximum increase is really a great deal paired with an opt-out fee that's not going to be increasing either, until 27 or 28. It really makes the program competitive.
Councilmember Marriott.
Thank you. So with regard to this slide, I want to say good job, Republic Services, for proposing this. I think this is the right thing to do. It's been the right thing to do since day one. It took a while to get here, but I'm glad that it's here. And I think my advice would be that the city do take Republic up on this proposal and do extend their contract through 2028 and do hold the existing opt-out fee at the existing amount and not increase that annually with the increases. And so, I think this is a fair deal. It's a good deal, and I appreciate Republic Services bringing this forward as a possible option.
Would the 99% performance standards still apply so that if we do renew the contract for another 3 years, now I have zero expectation that this would happen, but we have to just safeguard. So if performance were to fall, we had more missed calls, et cetera, we would then have the ability for cause to be able to reopen the contract? Those protections still stand?
Yes, it does, and I do track the 99.9%, and they are meeting requirements and satisfaction rates, so I don't think that will probably happen.
Oh, I believe it. I haven't gotten a call about it in over a year, and thank you for that. So with that, I will actually agree with Councilmember Marriott. I would be inclined to extend this to July 1st, 2028 with these additional protections in place. Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
So I was going to wait till later, and I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but I did want to talk more about producer responsibility. I've reached out to the Producer Responsibility Organization, Circular Action Alliance, and with the question of how does that impact our contracting as a municipality. And they have put out a draft plan for the state that's being reviewed right now. There's a section in that talks about municipalities, whether they are providing the hauling themselves in-house as a municipally run program or if they're contracting. And what it talks about is that the city will be the one who puts in a request for reimbursement under a contract situation. So it will be on our city to put in that request starting in 2026. In order to do that, it's really important for us to request from the contractor now to separate out the cost for recycling so we know what that cost is so we can make that request to the Circular Action Alliance or the Producer Responsibility Organization to get that reimbursement. So that's one thing I believe is not in our contract right now. It's not separated out recycling from trash service. And so I think that's something we're going to need to figure out before we move forward with whether we're going to renew the contract or not, is we're going to need to see how that cost is separated out so we can make sure we're taking advantage of that reimbursement. And then the second point to that then is, once we know that cost and we put in that request for reimbursement, how are we going to be able to adjust the pricing for our customers based on that reimbursement? And so that's something we need to figure out before we move forward with our decision on what we're going to do on the contracting. If it's a contract amendment and that's something we can work out, that's great, but I'm concerned about, deciding now if we're going to go with, up until 2028, for example, without a firm understanding of how that's going to work out for our customers, because it is important that they get that savings. The other piece to that is that it may be a great opportunity for us in 2026, when we get that reimbursement, to look at how, if we want to take on any types of organics collection and use some of that money from the reimbursement to offset the cost of compost as an option. So I just want to make sure we have all the options on our table when that time comes, as we're looking at our decision around the contract.
So the producer responsibility will be an amendment to the contract, and whatever is in place, I know it's written to be implemented by the state end of December, and they've got a 6-month leeway just to make sure that they finalize all the different types of scenarios, because there's quite a few.
So if we renew the contract through 2028, even though we have to do a contract amendment, these provisions in the contract now would stand, but we'd still be able to amend to incorporate this?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to go on to the expenses related to the city program fees, current and proposed. You can see here that we are comparing using slightly more full-time employees on the 2025 estimate. Also, several things that weren't included before, such as software costs for waste portion of use, in line 2 for normal program usage. That's actually gone down a bit, but more at a reasonable rate. We also had to move some things off of that normal program over to isolate them specifically for the large item and leaf events. And so you can see that line item has actually gone up. The mattress recycling has gone up by $10 this year alone per mattress. And the traffic control went up 50%. So other costs that were unforeseen, which add to, what we offer to the community. So that puts your total expenses for last year at $792,000, whereas this year we've put in the budget $822,526. What that means, the impact is that $1.50 that people currently pay the HOA that doesn't have service to be able to come to our bulk items, our leaf events, is going up to $1.69, and it also impacts everybody that has service, because they'll be going from $1.50 to $1.69. Okay, for this particular fee, you can see that impact of the $1.69, which is the very top line item, and you can see the total cost down at the bottom. So if you're at level 1, you're going from paying $12.70 per month to $13.29. If you've got the largest 95-gallon cart, you're going from $21.55 to $22.45. If you're going to opt out, remember, Republic's portion, if voted in for the 1 or 2 years to 27 or 28, is going to stay at the $4.55. It's the city's portion, which is going from $1.50 to $1.69. That still brings it from $6.05 to $6.24. And if you're in an HOA that already has their own trash service, you're going from $1.50 to $1.69.
Quickly, actually, I have a quick question on this. For extra bins, I know it's a smaller surcharge to get an extra trash bin or an extra recycling bin. Are those costs, remind me what those are, and are those impacted as well?
Those costs would still be subject to the 3.5%. It's only the $4.55, the opt-out fee from Republic, that would make the stay.
That's fine. Remind me what those prices are again?
I don't have those figures right offhand in
That's
my
okay.
notes.
Thank you. Councilmember Marriott.
Yeah, so I had a question about this slide. So I think the explanation of why the program fee has to go up is adequate and makes complete sense. Everything costs more these days, including the part the city does for this program. The part that I'm wondering about here that I don't see anything about is the cart fee. So obviously a significant number of carts were bought all at once and deployed all at once, and they're all getting old, and kind of all getting old all at once. Do we have any kind of metrics about what shape our cart fleet is in, and how long are they going to last? When are they going to need to be replaced? What's it going to cost to replace them? Is the fee we're currently charging enough to both pay off the carts that we already bought and deployed, but then also to replace them when they're at the end of their life? Because I've seen them smashed and broken, and some of them are worn out already, and some of them won't wear out for a long time. But at eventually, everyone will have to be replaced, and there'll be some cadence at which they're replaced. And my assumption would be that the cart fee would do that. Do we know yet? Are we charging an adequate amount of that for that fee to be able to meet those obligations without having a one-time, bigger fee?
At this point in time, we are meeting the cart fees. That's because we've got about 1,000 95-gallon trash cans and about 500 95-gallon recycle bins. We have the other sizes too, but they're in smaller increments because they're not, the one in highest demand is the 95-gallon bin. They do have a 10-year warranty on them, so they're not actually going to be out of warranty until after 2031. Some of the wear and tear that I've seen on trash bins has been some type of ashes were put in the trash bin and the trash bin burned and had to be replaced. I have seen some squirrels that have taken to the lid of the trash bin and been able to chew through it, but the majority of bins are working. The wheels are set up in such a manner that the best way for me to describe it is they kind of click on and off, so the whole wheel system works a little bit better than some other wheel type containers. So I do believe the majority will last. The thing that we will have to look at in the future is if we really want an HOA adoption and we're ready to take that on, then we're going to need to order carts and make sure that we have enough of them.
All right, okay. So let me ask Mr. Archer this. When we bought the original supply of trash carts, how did we do that? Where did the money come from?
So we had an internal borrowing that we were paying back over a period of time. So if I remember properly, it came from our wastewater fund.
Okay.
And then we're planning on paying them back. We have one more year left, I think. I can pull it up, but I think one more year left, and that will be paid off. And then the proceeds that we've been charging will then go into our fund balance with the goal to replace in 2031 or 2032 the entire fleet.
For cart replacements?
Yeah.
Okay. And so we're on, as far as you know, we're on track there.
Yeah.
We're not behind. Everything's meeting kind
Yeah.
of.
Yeah,
what
so
we thought.
far, I mean, for a period of time, we saw a little bit of where some carts were finding new homes outside of the city.
Mm-hmm.
But up until recently, we've been doing pretty well. So, yeah, I mean, we run it every year as a team, and we take a look at it, and we feel like things are going as we thought.
Okay, got it. And have we actually had the manufacturer doing warranty service yet?
We haven't had to send any to the manufacturer for warranty service, no. I am in contact with the manufacturer, and if we needed that, they would certainly service it for us.
Because, I mean, I've seen them with lids gone.
We have extra lids.
So we're
Also-
handling that in-house then, the manufacturer's not?
Right, we are not sending a mass amount of carts, recycle, or trash, or anything to the original manufacturer to fix or replace.
Okay. And is that service that we're doing where we're internally repairing carts or replacing parts or repairing carts or redeploying, all that, that's covered in the city program fee. Is it reflected in here?
So regardless,
'Cause somebody has to do it, right?
right,
I mean,
is-
nobody's doing it for free.
as long as you've got service, you're allowed to swap out one free cart per year. So the few that we have had that got damaged, Republic was able to replace at this point.
Okay, and so that, I guess that was my question is, who is fixing carts? Who's changing them out? Who's taking new ones, picking up melted ones or squirrel chewed ones or?
So
whatever
Republic
the issue is?
takes care of it for us. It's a coordinated effort between
Okay.
us and them, but they do actually physically handle it.
Got it, okay. And do we get charged, billed for those on a per piece basis, or it's just
No,
part of the contract that they do?
Republic
and-
is nice enough to keep our extra stock at their yard. So we still have extras. Like I said, we have probably about 1,095 gallon trash bins. So we still have extras, and we also still have lids. We've got the smaller sizes too, just not a lot of them.
Right, got it. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
On the question of the purchase of carts, we also had some grants for that too, correct?
We did. We used those grants to offset our original purchase cost, and so we borrowed less money when we did that.
Okay, thank you.
I see no further lights. Please continue.
Okay. All right, this is the 95-gallon cart customer current and proposed fees comparison. Again, the proposed fee increase would put Arvada in the orange at $21.55. That's a 90-cent difference. Again, just like the other slide, Broomfield's cost is $19.43. That's truly for a 65-gallon bin, whereas the 95-gallon cart cost is $29.93 and should be placed before Golden that charges $31.94. And again, North Glen and Thornton do their own in-house services, so it's merely just a comparison for you.
Quickly, I understand if we don't have these numbers tonight. North Glen and Thornton with the in-house, since we were kind of getting to this earlier, when did they establish their programs, and how? What was the cost to get them up and running? Because I remember it's a significant investment to create an in-house program. I don't expect you to have those numbers tonight, but for when we come back, those would just be a couple of interesting data points.
It is a significant cost. Just the trucks alone can range between $250,000 to $500,000. I'll let Jacqueline go ahead and take over here.
Thank you. I was taking notes on the questions. So Mr. Archer alluded to this earlier. Something that we're working on is ensuring that the city fiscal policy formally establishes a fund balance or a working capital reserve goal. And so we anticipate that we would be proposing something consistent with some of the other funds, around 25% of our expenditures. But we did want to provide this update that we will be formally bringing that forward for your direction. We are working on this, as Mr. Archer mentioned, as we repay the loan balance and work to build this working capital balance. That'll be something that we're working on as the future for the program.
Councilmember Marriott.
Let me ask a question about a fund balance in an enterprise fund program like this. Or is the goal to try to get a 25% of expenditures of each of these items separately within the fund, or just in general a fund balance that's equivalent to cover all these, in addition to the annual service that Republic charges to provide the service, or is it separate? Is it a fund balance for the city's expenditures and the hard costs of carts and things like that, and then the contracted part you don't have a fund balance for?
So this fund's a little unique compared to the other ones that we operate. The other ones that we operate, we take it on total, so it's 25% of overall. Because this one has a contract, we would probably look at it in a different way. And so we do owe council a workshop and a conversation about your fund balance goals. This would be one from you, so we would look to take direction from you. But probably our recommendation is a combination of both. So we would probably look at having some level of reserve related to the Republic contract, but really more trying to protect our internal.
Right, okay. And how are we handling, you know, I don't know how it works. I don't know if Republic bills us before the service is rendered or after the service is rendered.
Yeah, from a timing perspective, we have a little bit of both. So we, in some cases, have services that we are paying before we have collected because these are tied to our other utility bills. But most of the time, we collect and get billed about the same time.
Okay. And so I would assume that, to not put the other city funds at risk. Obviously, the city's a big organization and has a lot of money in the bank, but in an effort to not put other city funds at risk, that you would want to have some, customers who have paid for service they haven't yet gotten or have, you'd add an increment on top of those who are getting service for some period of time until you've got, in my business, I guess I'd want 2 or 3 months worth of kind of reserve on the contractual part. So not the city's cost, but just the contractual part. But it doesn't sound like that's how we're operating at all. We're kind of operating as in and out in the same instant. Is there any thought, or will this be part of that discussion on fund balances of, a structure to set that up? Like, should the city have a 2-month, 3-month reserve on the contractual part?
Absolutely. That'll be part of the further conversation. Part of the work that this team is doing is really understanding direction from you and then how we get there. If you remember when we set this up a few years ago, we had what we called an enterprise fee, and we were charging that to try to build that fund balance and also to try to offset the carts. And so as we continue to move forward, we will be using that as well to get to that point. So it is a really long-term look towards this. Our thought was we wouldn't reach that for 10 years. We're in year 4 of this, and so we're still not there yet. But I think in the end, the team is liking exactly what you had described. They would like to have it on an overall number versus just the city costs.
Right, okay. All right. I guess, just more to come on this. Obviously, we'll have a more in-depth discussion on this. My own philosophy would be that this program should pay for itself, and it shouldn't endanger, other city assets or city funds. And so I would certainly want to see a plan within this fund where the ratepayers build up a fund balance both on the city cost side of whatever a reasonable amount is. I don't know if it's 25% of annual expenditures on the city cost side. And then there ought to be some, again, reasonable amount that might be the same or it might be less or it might be more, some reasonable amount on the contractual side too. And, maybe those are separate, maybe they're different, maybe they come from different places, within the structure of what people are paying. But I would certainly be for making sure we have a discussion about that, and then that we pick a sound fiscal way of going about getting there. So again, that this program doesn't endanger other parts of the city's operations.
Okay, so we'd love to hear additional feedback from you. We presented a couple of different options. If we stay with the status quo, we'd be bringing forward a contract amendment only through 2026. But as you heard, the options from Republic to hold the Republic minimum service opt-out fee, they are looking for us to extend through 2027 or 2028. And then we did present the basis of the budget and the estimates for the city program side of the fees and what those increases would be. With your direction, we can then bring forward either additional information in the next workshop, or we can just bring forward what you'd like to see in that resolution.
Councilmember Rupert.
I'd simply be interested in doing the renewals with the condition that in the event we have new requirements from the legislation, that we have the ability to make those adjustments. But really the inflation rate is a very good deal for our users, and I think we can do that.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Mormon.
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, I just want to make sure that we have all the options available to us when that funding becomes available, and that we're able to adjust our rates accordingly. And we have a good, clear understanding of what that recycling cost is in our contract that I don't believe we have currently. So I just want to keep flagging that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Marriott.
I'd agree with Councilmember Rupert. I would be for exercising our options with the deal that Republic has given us through 2028. I think it should be conditional on being able to accurately handle this producer price fee. It's a tariff or a tax that citizens are paying on everything they're buying, and they should get it back. That's the object is, that rather than pay it later, you're paying it up front, and you're paying it embedded in all the goods and services that you buy that produce packaging, and you shouldn't be charged twice for the same thing. So I would agree with that. I also agree with the proposed city program fee increase. I think that's warranted. I think you guys are doing a very good job running this program, and it's bound to cost more over time, and I think we will see these annual city program fees. And then lastly, I would definitely want to see another discussion about the fund balance and fund balance policy on this particular enterprise fund, and I'd like to see that put in place so that, again, we're responsible with this particular enterprise fund. So yeah, that'd be my what I'd like to see.
Thank you.
Ditto. All right. Sounds good. Sounds like we have direction to go through 2028 with those guardrails in place.
Thank you. So what the schedule will look like is, as outlined on this slide, we'll make sure that we bring back those contract provisions. We'll work with Republic Services and our legal team to ensure what you asked for is represented in that amendment. And instead of coming back on the May 13th in a workshop format, we'll bring forward, if that amendment looks good, request for adoption in that resolution. So thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate the
very much,
direction
Ms.
tonight.
Rhodes, and your team. Thank you for all your hard work. Next, we have an additional workshop on our paid parking discussion. Welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm Derek Fern. I'm the TDM and parking coordinator for the city, and I'm here to talk about paid parking, to follow up on the last time I was up here on October 28th. So we're going to go over the purpose and the background, some highlights from last time, just to get everybody back up to speed of why we're having this conversation. I'm going to dive in a little bit into some past consultant recommendations that we've received over the years for our parking demand management in Old Town, as well as specific direction that we received from council from the last meeting, which includes parking demand. Some additional data will be portrayed for the current weekday peak demand that we have, as well as in between those afternoon and evening peak times that Mr. Marriott, or Councilmember Marriott, requested at last meeting, as well as some apples to apples comparison. It was brought up that Morrison's paid parking program might be better to look at than some of the examples that we gave in the last meeting. So I will be presenting on that, as well as go over some of the business engagement that we've done since we spoke last. I got in front of the Business Improvement District Board of Directors shortly after our meeting last time in November to go over essentially the same how and why that we went over here back in October, as well as an open house that we had in March, that some of you attended. Thank you for your attendance. And then at the end, we'll go over some next steps and where we go from here. So before I get into this, I just wanted to bring up the fact that to try to illustrate the point that a lot of the points that we made and thresholds we made, points of in October, like the 85% occupancy, those are standard across the entire parking industry. So as the parking professional that we have here at the city, that's kind of my duty to bring those up and to point to those. So we will cover some of those here, coming down the slide here. But dating back to 2010, we had our very first comprehensive parking study for long-term parking planning for parking demand management in Old Town, when we knew that things were going to change, that demand was going to increase, and that there was already plans for future developments that were going to potentially take away parking. So we reached out to actually Walker Consultants back in 2010 to have our very first comprehensive study, and it is comprehensive. It's well over 100 pages. But two of the key takeaways for this conversation tonight is that that was the first time we were recommended to move to time limitations with active enforcement within the Old Town District to ensure that those spaces were being turned over appropriately. And the long-term recommendation at that time was to implement paid parking when certain thresholds were met, one being that 85 percentile that was mentioned last time. So if 85% of the supply is being surpassed during peak periods over extended periods of time, and we're also seeing a lot of time infraction citations being issued, that it was recommended in 2010 to move towards a paid parking model. Moving to 2016, we tried to get ahead of the transit hub construction and what that would look like for parking demand in Old Town, and we again reached out to Walker. This is a city request, and it was at that time that we expanded, based on their recommendation, the time zones or the time limit zones from Grandview to Ralston and Yukon to Upham, so essentially where you see those time limitations in place now. As well as at that time, they did, again, emphasize that if you're issuing a lot of timed infractions and you're seeing above that 85 percentile in the 90s and 95% occupancy over a long period of time, that paid parking should be the next demand management strategy. And that same year, the Business Improvement District requested a parking and mobility evaluation and recommendation study, kind of in conjunction with the one that we requested at the city. And they noted that 150 parking spaces within the core of Old Town had disappeared for multiple reasons since 2010 when that initial study was done. And they also noted that on and off-street public parking significantly increased during that time of observation in that 6 years. And due to that high occupancy that they saw in 2016, that was their recommendation to move to a paid parking model then because of that demand. And then most recently we had the Old Town Strategic Reinvestment Plan, where one of the short-term projects for implementation between 2024 and 2026, it was recommended to move to paid parking on street within Old Town to align with TDM, or Transportation Demand Management Strategies, and encourage turnover and expand the availability of those limited parking spaces. So this is a recap. Those are kind of the recommendations of a demand management issue, and I just kind of want to reemphasize why we're really having this conversation, and it's for those visitors and customers and what they're experiencing. And they're seeing that parking is unavailable close to where they would like to go. They're having to park further and further away. They're seeing an inefficient use of the limited parking supply with low turnover. They're seeing that they have to circle the block multiple times over and over, trying to hope and pray that somebody in front of them is going to pull out when they're pulling up Old Wadsworth or down Grandview, so they can find a spot. And that leads to unnecessary traffic congestion and additional vehicle emissions. We're also seeing a lot of illegal parking. I think some folks see that as the only option, with legal parking being all occupied. So that leads to safety concerns from visitors as well as residents. Blocking driveways, parking too close to crosswalks, blocking alleyways, parking in front of fire hydrants. These are the kind of violations that we're seeing due to that high demand and a lack of supply. We're also seeing a lot of parking citations for overtime. That is our #1 parking citation issued in Old Town, followed closely by those illegal parking violations that I mentioned. And this is not necessarily something that the customer totally understands that they are experiencing, but free parking is essentially subsidized by the general fund. So every taxpayer in Arvada pays for the parking in Old Town, the management, the infrastructure improvements, the maintenance of those public assets. It's all subsidized by tax dollars. So how can paid parking assist with those customer issues and help alleviate some of these concerns that we have with demand being so high? It incentivizes parking compliance by ensuring that the parking assets are allocated adequately to allow for closer parking spaces for those that need them and are willing to pay for them. It balances the parking demand by spreading it across facilities, hopefully to use our underutilized transit hub a little more frequently. It provides a dedicated revenue stream to fund infrastructure improvements, to assist with maintenance needs, such as the pavers that seem to be deteriorating and things of that nature. And it also allows for the potential to add additional staffing resources, whether that's parking ambassadors or maintenance crews or snow removal or, those many needs that we have in Old Town, as well as the potential for, funding some sort of security or additional lighting, to make people feel a little safer down there. It reduces the perceptions of unfair enforcement by setting clear rules and parking fees and rates associated with the public parking. It increases the availability as long as it is priced appropriately. You can get that 95%, 100% occupancy down to that Goldilocks zone of 85%, where you have that 1 to 2 parking spaces on every block and maybe 10 open within the central lot of Webster Lot. It reduces the circling and improves the safety and traffic congestion by having those spaces available. And it also causes shorter dwell times, so that increases the availability and increases the customer throughput. So some of the takeaways that we had from our last meeting, I'll just go over these real briefly and then go into them. Increase wayfinding signage to the transit hub. Make sure that people know that that option is available to them. Collect more data, specifically off-peak, on-street occupancy counts. We're going to review Morrison paid parking program, outside, the outcomes of that program. Reach out to the bid and local businesses, which we have done, which I have Katie Patterson, which is our communications manager for infrastructure with me. She's going to go over some slides later of some results that we got from those meetings, as well as create a strategic communications and engagement plan, which she has been instrumental in creating and begin work on. So here are some examples of the hub wayfinding signage that we've posted currently. So on the left there, that's the Webster lot. These are non-MUTCD standard issue, but they are within a public lot to try to inform people that when you go to that central lot, which tends to draw people to it because people, a parking lot, I have a better chance of finding a parking spot in there. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. So we want to ensure that we let people know that there is another free public parking option for them at the city's transit hub with a QR code that gets them directly to the website, the city's website that has information on the transit hub and how to get there. As far as our on-street parking signs, we put up public parking garage signs with arrows, the universally understood P in a circle to let people know that parking is available. Those are strategically placed around the district, especially at the corner of Vance and Grandview, to help people get down that hill and hopefully find the rest of the signs that we posted prior to the last meeting to get into that transit hub. And our facilities team worked on updating some of the exterior signage to the transit hub as well, to when they get there, or if they're passing it on the way into Old Town, they know that that transit hub is not just for RTD users. It's also available to the public for people that want to visit and come into Old Town. So I'll try not to take too much time here, but essentially this chart here shows a kind of a snapshot in time. So this is information that I've gathered since our last meeting to include off-peak data and compare that to the on-peak data. And this is strictly weekday average parking demand on street. So this is not including the weekends, which I feel we can all agree. Parking is very hard to find on those dates and might skew those numbers a little more towards the 100 percentile. So in the blue there, you'll see the afternoon peak collected from between 12 and 2 p.m. and actually have the averages here. So the average from November to March afternoon peak was 88% over those months. So you can see the off-peak kind of, it dips down a little bit in there, but I can say it's not a very large dip. I mean, it doesn't go down to 10% or 15% or even 50%. It's still relatively high. Over those 5 months that you see here, that average is 73%, almost 74%, showing that it does dip, but people still want to come down there. And then the evening peak, of course, is actually the highest average there. People are out of work, they want to come to dinner. Average over these last 5 months has been 94%. I did have another point I wanted to make on this. You may come to me.
Councilmember Marriott.
So I wanted to ask you, these numbers, is this just the street parking, or does this include the parking lots?
It does not include the Webster lot. I did not include it
Okay.
because it's essentially always a 100% full.
Okay. So it doesn't include the Webster lot, it doesn't include the parking hub, the garage, right?
Correct. This is strictly on-street.
Okay. And doesn't include the Elks lot either, obviously?
No, that's the private lot.
city-owned. Okay. So if you were to add in the total parking in Old Town, so you'd add in to the street parking, you'd add the Webster lot that's 100% all the time, and you'd add the parking garage that's whatever percent it is.
About 35% at peak.
Whatever time. What would these numbers look like? Do you have an
Well,
idea?
if we factored in the transit hub, they would go down because it's less occupied.
Do you have an idea of the magnitude that they would go down? I guess that's what I'm looking for.
I don't. I can get it for you. I mean,
Okay.
I'd be happy to send something out on a Friday memo if you'd like.
Okay,
Sure.
that'd be fine, thank you. But it would go down a bunch, because there's typically a bunch of spaces in the hub.
Correct, yeah.
unused.
I mean, at 35%, that's about 250 parking spaces at peak, which peak there is different than on-street. That's more of the commuters that fill it up. But then if I wanted to look at the weekends, when there's a higher transient kind of, visitor for coming to visit Old Town, that would change the peak. The
Sure.
weekend peaks are different. But yeah, I'd be happy to get you some of that data.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Councilmember Rupert.
I'm assuming that the morning hours prior to noon are much lower than the averages that you've got here?
Yes, if you go down there at 8 a.m., 9 a.m., yes, there's significant more availability.
What percentages are typical of that time frame?
I don't track those. I could, if you would like to see what those are, but I can tell you that it's kind of a moot point. I mean, I think there's plenty of parking during that time.
Okay.
So if we decided to move to paid parking, that would be something we would look at. Do we want to start it when we start enforcement of the time limits at 8 a.m.? Or would it make sense to do it later when there's actually demand?
Right.
And that would probably be the way that would make the most sense for everybody.
Thanks.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes, thank you for all of this. This is very enlightening. So your evening peak is from 5 to 7, but 7 to 9, 7 to 10, 7 to 11, you cannot find a parking space in Old Town. So I'm just wondering what the logic is behind stopping at 7 and maybe not going a 7 to 9, 9 to 11.
Sure, of course. Thank you for that question. The data that I have that at my disposal to collect is only during the hours of enforcement, because we have vehicles driving around, they pick up the license plates, I go into the system, I see how many are in there, I delete the duplicates. I mean, it's actually kind of tedious to collect this data. So I only have it until they finish their shifts at 7 p.m. So if we wanted to move forward with this, and we would look at what those times are, because like I said, with the early morning hours, would we want to shift when we would charge for parking and when we would want to have enforcement to really cover the highest demand? because it wouldn't make sense to make someone pay at 8 in the morning when they're just running in to grab a coffee, and it wouldn't make sense to do it at midnight because everything's closed and no one's there.
Councilmember Ambrose.
Yeah, that was going to be my question, is that you're not looking for, paid parking on every single spot in Old Town or in the transit hub. You're looking at the places where it's the most congested, where it's 100% or 85% and above, so that we can drive more to the hub, which is not, if the hub gets full, then we would talk about paid parking in the hub later on, right?
Correct,
But right
yes.
now, you're just looking at what are the problem areas and how paid parking can change that so that there is parking availability for business turnover and convenience for Arvadans.
Correct, with the option of the transit hub as a free option that anyone has access to.
Okay,
Correct.
so you would consider paid parking in the Webster lot then too, if it's filled 100% of the time?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Any more questions on this slide?
See no lights?
Perfect. All right, Morrison. I live in Morrison, so I'm kind of a fan. But they implemented a trial program for paid parking in the summer of 2021 that was meant to just cover the summer months with the option to extend. And they voted unanimously, the town council did, at the end of that trial program to extend it for 2 years and then again in 2023. And just to kind of show how flexible they are and how flexible you have to be if you want to have a successful paid parking model. They're currently in talks with business owners in the district to adjust the enforcement hours. Some of the businesses down there with the later night restaurant and bar crowds wanted the hours to go from all the way to 8 p.m. back to 7 p.m. to allow a little more flexibility for their patrons. So that's part of the discussion, as well as reducing the citation costs. They're currently at $50 for non-payment. That goes up to $100 after 10 days if you don't pay it within that grace period. So that's part of the conversation as well as looking at the rate structure and potentially reducing that. They're also looking at shifting, either making it cheaper in the slower months or just pausing the program altogether during those months where it's a little slower during the winter months and they're not seeing those long-term parkers trying to take up those limited parking spaces by hiking and biking in the area that they see throughout the summertime in the warmer months. As well as they're asking for some improvements to their employee parking areas as part of the program to increase lighting, to look at potential for additional satellite parking lots for their employees, because honestly, they're more limited than we are as far as space and geography. It's a strip in a little canyon, so they have a little harder time coming up with a program that really works for everyone. I don't think we would necessarily have some of the problems that they're facing right now, but I did want to also touch on the sales tax revenue, because this is in line with what we expressed back in October, where we gave you some other options that maybe weren't quite apples to apples and little more touristy areas of Idaho Springs and Manitou Springs. I just wanted to show this graph here, this chart here, to show that in 2021, you can see that there was a slight increase from 2020 to 2021 when paid parking was implemented, another slight increase in 2022, and then a fairly significant one in 2023. And I'm not trying to say that paid parking necessarily increased business sales. It might have played a role in that, but it definitely didn't hurt as much as some people may have that inclination to feel that way. So I just wanted to point that out. And at this point, I will let someone else come up and talk. I'm sure you guys are kind of tired of hearing my voice right now, so I'll hand it over to Katie Patterson.
Welcome, Ms. Patterson.
Thank you. I'm not behind the computer, so it's good to see you all. And so I'm Katie Patterson, Communications Manager for our infrastructure team. I help Derek with community conversation with business owners in Old Town, as well as a survey that we completed with those business owners to get you all some more information about their perceptions and experiences around parking in Old Town. So on March 19th, we had a community meeting. We had about 10 folks there that are business owners, and Derek shared similar information to both what you heard in October and this evening to help kind of set the ground floor and understand kind of what the challenges that Old Town's experiencing are and some of the needs, and then open it up to conversation and questions. So you can see some themes there on the screen, and I'll caveat, you'll hear wayfinding signage for the hub come up as a theme throughout, and the signage that Derek mentioned had just been put up, so we can't necessarily say how that's maybe changing behavior at this point. And so that conversation did come up, as well as an idea for some type of a shuttle circulator during busier times. There were concerns around employee parking and where employees should be parking, and then safety for both customers and employees, particularly in the evenings or making longer walks to destinations. And then there were some questions and a variety of ideation. As you can imagine, people love to jump to the what's the structure, how much is it going to cost, and that sort of thing. And so there was a lot of conversation around that. And generally at this point, that's all kind of, as Derek's mentioned, flexible and on the table. So we just reiterated that with folks. And then following that meeting, we had a survey open, encouraged everyone who was there to take that survey. That also included a recording of the same information that was presented at the meeting. So folks could get that information and then fill out that survey. And I'll mention that Joe at the Old Town Bid was also super helpful, and he even walked around to businesses and helped ask folks to take the survey. So we're thankful for his support in that, and we got 18 folks to participate. And so I'll walk you through what we heard through that. We did a set of 4 quantitative questions to kind of get an idea of experiences and perceptions around parking, and then we did a couple of open-ended questions that I'll go through after. And so how would you rank access to parking in Old Town? You'll see largely somewhat difficult, but a little bit on the spectrum of neutral to somewhat easy there. In general, what days or of the week do you think it's hard to find parking for customers and visitors? And Thursday through Sunday, with Friday through Sunday being particularly high there. What times of day do you perceive it to be hard for customers and visitors? So that 11 to 8 p.m. threshold there really being the highest from 2 to 8 p.m. And what do you think customers would be willing to pay? That $1 to $2 mark really rose to the top there. And then the 4 open-ended questions kind of summarized for you there. The role of paid parking, what's the role of paid parking or parking management in Old Town? How do they perceive that role? And then what challenges do their staff have with using the hub? That's something that Derek has heard, and we've heard some feedback on in the past, so we wanted to dig into that a little bit more. Any suggestions for addressing parking challenges, and then just a general anything else. And so you'll see some themes that came out from that. That top theme there really was in response to the first question, what role does parking management and paid parking play? And so a tool for helping with turnover, all these things that Derek's kind of mentioned were pretty reiterated in the survey responses, an enforcement mechanism, a way to ease that parking frustration that folks experience, and then a way to reinvest some revenue in Old Town. The interest in improving hub usage was reiterated, as well as improving the wayfinding signage. And then some mentions of safety and accessibility improvements in the hub and in Old Town in general. Program structure came up, as I mentioned, from the community conversation as well. There were concerns about keeping any program affordable and then having flexibility in the days that are charged, the times of day, the length of stays, all of those sorts of things came up in a variety of ways. And then kind of reiterating the affordability concerns, there were some concerns about just impacts to businesses and what that might look like. And a couple of comments around just general support or unsupportive without, maybe more context for those. So any questions on the feedback we heard? Okay. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, would you say it was evenly split between supportive and unsupportive, or?
It's hard to say. We didn't ask a question specifically around support. So there were some comments around, several comments of unsupport without any context. And then there were a lot of comments that just gave more robust answers to the questions, but didn't necessarily tell us if they were in support or not. I will say the tone of the community meeting was relatively receptive. People seem to have an understanding and are feeling these challenges. Does anybody want to move to a paid parking model? Is it like easy to understand? I don't think that is something we can expect, but it's hard to say.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I did attend one of those meetings at the Elks, and I just wanted to compliment staff. It was very well done. We didn't get to the sticker portion, which was unfortunate. You had that all set up. But I do think that there was a lot of robust conversation, and I think staff was so open to listening to it, and that was what was so marvelous. You just did a good job. I just want to make sure that you were complimented on those efforts.
Thank you. The stickers are back up if we had a massive crowd, so 10 people, we could just have a conversation. Well, with that, then we just wanted to open it up for questions and conversation about next steps. Derek and I are both willing to kind of talk about what that could look like. I can say, as Derek mentioned, if it's kind of a continuation of looking into further models of what this looks like, I will be there to help with communication and engagement with business owners and, expanding that out as we need to. And then Derek can help with anything else around what you'd like to see going forward.
Councilmember Marriott.
I have a question for you. These business survey results that you had 18 responses to, did you only ask 4 questions?
There's 8. So the four questions about that were the first 4,
Right.
And then this slide these are the 4 open-ended questions. I just summarized them.
Right. Okay. So we don't have any kind of. I guess I'm surprised we never asked the question. Would you prefer? Would paid parking in Old Town be advantageous to you, or would paid parking in Old Town be negative to you, or anything like that? We never asked kind of a more definitive question or a value-tested version of a definitive question.
No, we really were looking to get more about their experiences and perceptions with parking currently, to help that inform any future conversations.
Okay.
I think we'd be hard pressed to get a lot of, yes, I support paid parking, just like off the bat without helping to like create that understanding and shared conversation. So that was where that intention was at.
So do we have, I know you're asking us for, kind of next steps or path forward. I guess what I would say is, I'll come back to a couple of thoughts, general thoughts. You've heard these before. The total quantity of parking in Old Town seems to be more than sufficient. Where it's located maybe isn't ideal, and that's because a significant amount of the parking is located in the hub, and people are finding it difficult to use the hub, either because of they don't know about it, the access to it, they don't feel safe, they don't like it, whatever the reason that people aren't using the hub, it appears to be, underutilized. Meanwhile, the parking on the streets and the Webster lot is fully utilized. I wouldn't say overutilized, because I don't think that's possible. I think it's just, it gets used to its fullest potential, and people troll around the block twice and don't find anything. I assume they go a little further and find something. I don't know that how many people just leave because they went around the block 2 or 3 times and didn't find anything. I also, doesn't make sense that people would troll around the block for 45 minutes until they find something, because they're just so stubborn, by golly, they're going to park on the street close to where they want to go. I mean, that doesn't make sense either. So, that's one thought, a general overall thought. My second thought is that with every change like this comes, disruption. With disruptions, there's potential winners and losers, and I'm concerned about the people who might be losers. And, I think there are businesses in Old Town and everywhere throughout the city that they can't afford to have any of their customers chased off, like literally 0 customers chased off. And I'm afraid if you implement paid parking, that's one of the possibilities, that there are people who have always gone down there who go, I'm going to change my bank to a different bank because I don't want to park. I don't want to, be subject to this, or, whatever. I mean, it's certainly reasonable to expect that you're going to do that. So I think that leads me to want to proceed very cautiously. And it leads me to who really, while the council may ultimately make this decision, the people who actually really need to be making this decision is the people who have a big invested stake in Old Town, and that's the business owners. And I don't think it's quite as simple as just, paid parking or no paid parking. It's paid parking how? Like, how much, what are the hours, where, how? I think it's much more complicated than just a binary yes or no. Because I think if you did ask just the yes or no, you probably get no's, because I think most of the businesses would be fearful. And so when I look at this, I look at it as, I think I would try to do a bit more working with the businesses in Old Town of potentially, maybe we sit down as big a group as we can get, or a key stakeholder group, or individual one-on-one, and say, let us give you a couple of scenarios. Here's paid parking scenario number one, which is 50 cents an hour, only for the spots in the Webster lot, and nothing for on the street. Give us your feedback on that. How about $1 an hour? It includes the Webster lot and on the street. Here's $5 an hour to include all the spots, and what do you think of that? And try to tease out maybe a little bit more detailed information about what the people that this really affects, which is the business owners in there, really try to tease out a bit more about, a little deeper thought by them and probably by us, about what does this mean for you, and at what point does it go from being maybe a positive, maybe a neutral, to negative, or maybe just a little bit negative to a lot negative, or maybe a lot positive to only a little positive, or whatever. Because it's clear that you could implement a parking regimen in Old Town that would be very destructive to all the businesses there. I mean, you make $10 an hour for every spot in Old Town and chase people away in droves. So it's clear you can do that. I think that's what we have to be careful, is to not do that. And so I think we have to let those who are the stakeholders that count, which is the businesses in Old Town, really give them a bigger hand in constructing this. I'm not personally opposed to some form of paid parking in places in Old Town, but I still think, to me, it's unclear where those places might be, when those places might be, and how much those places would be. And as just a resident of west of Old Town and a frequent visitor to Old Town, I don't feel like I'm qualified to make that decision for somebody else who has a significant investment there. So, my suggestion for what's the path forward or the next steps would be to, whether it's a big group, whether it's a focus group, whether it's individuals, whether it's all of the above, to sit down and talk in more detail about some particular scenarios, some possibilities, and try to tease out and get a little bit more in-depth information about what would be they would be most receptive of, maybe least fearful of, maybe see the most benefit from, but try to do a little bit. I think we've got a good start here with what we've done, but I don't see us in a place with what we've done able to make a decision that affects people's, livelihood, and in some cases their entire net worth of them and their whole family at this point. So I would suggest the path forward is a bit more work, maybe a little bit more detailed, from some various angles, to really have a real good handle on this before we were to act.
Yeah, thank you. Do you mind if I just address a couple of those? Well, for one, I agree with you. There is ample parking available, and paid parking helps, as I mentioned, kind of disperse it a little more. And as it is now, with everything being free, no one's really incentivized to look up, where are these wayfinding signs, right? They're looking down at the street waiting for someone to pull out of a parking spot. So I think even right now, with the effort that we did with the wayfinding, it might not be as effective of informing people that we have other parking available until they start looking up. They're like, oh, it's paid parking now? Oh, what are my other options? That's just one take that I have, and I agree with you that I would love to see the transit hub a little more utilized.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you on that point either, by the way, just so you know.
Well, and another point that I just wanted to make based on your comments is that there's so many different ways we could build this parking model that we would try to do our best to incorporate everyone's input. I know Golden has 2 hours of free before it's paid parking. I don't think that's the way we should go. I mean, maybe if we have a consultant come in and they find that that is the way to go and make that recommendation, or we figure that out through the course of what we do here, or it could be 30 minutes free or an hour free, and then it turns to paid parking. So some of those little shops where people do just run in for, or I'm gonna go grab a coffee and a bagel, why am I gonna have to pay $2? I'm not gonna come here anymore. Like, that's the kind of thing that we're gonna take into account to ensure that if we build a model, it will work for everyone. And I mean, at least the vast majority. I mean, you have to do your best in a situation like this.
Yeah, thank you.
Councilmember Davis.
Yes, I know that you heard a lot of these ideas at the public meetings, but something that you said, Morrison businesses saw sales tax increases. They didn't see a drop-off. By the way, I love Morrison. Every time I go there, I feel like I'm on vacation. So I was thinking, you know, as Mr. Marriott suggested, working with the businesses, there's an opportunity to get some of that lived experience from the Morrison business owners to the Old Town business owners, and let them talk about the pros, the cons, the pains, the growing pains, and then the ultimate, like, well, this is, you know, it's actually helping with revenue, doing all the important work that can come from paid parking. So I think that's a great part of the outreach and education. And just working with businesses, getting flyers at their points of sales, so that a flyer goes in the bag with the receipt, or somehow is attached to the receipt, and now I know about this paid parking. I think that would be very helpful. And I am an engineer, so I'm very excited about pilot studies and pilot plans. And I think there's ways to do this as a pilot, and then pull back and look at the data, and then move forward from the information that you gather during the pilot phase. I love that kind of stuff. I think that that's very valuable. So that's my 2 cents, but thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ambrose.
Yes, thank you for the presentation, and thank you for your honesty in that, you know, no matter what we do, any form of paid parking is probably going to be unpopular. People just want to be able to park for free. They don't want to have to pay for something. And so I think it is an uphill battle in the public perception, and being able to engage with the public and have the fact sharing and about the perceptions they have, like, if we move to paid parking, how much business would they lose versus how much the business they're losing now, because there's no turnover in convenient parking spots. That's an unknown, right? That we could try and say with other sales tax figures that you presented in the last one, and now this one, Morrison, that it seems that there is, you know, some expertise that the city that the city could share, that the city could share, that would help people be able to make informed decisions about which model they think would work best for the community, because I think businesses are a key constituency and stakeholder, so they really need these decisions to, you know, the information to make these informed decisions. But there are lots of other stakeholders for Old Town, such as the people who commute, residents who live there, tenants, both people who rent and business tenants. There's nonprofits there. There's the Arvada Historical Society, there's the Visitor Center, and then you have some congregations. So while the business community is really important and is really affected by this and could be affected in a positive way, there's lots of other stakeholders that need to be brought in about paid parking to make sure that, you know, if we have people, the visitor centers trying to draw people from out of town to come and visit Arvada, and if they can't find a parking space, then they're going to go spend their tourist dollars somewhere else. So making sure that we are working with all the stakeholders and weighing that in and sharing the facts that we know and the expertise that we have in paid parking in comparison to other cities that the public may not have access to, making sure that we're doing that engagement would be important. And I also like the idea of presenting lots of different options to figure out, the community, and with the community engagement, figuring out which one's going to be the best. And at the end of the day, I remember talking to a city staff person about implementing paid parking, and she was like, yeah, the last city I did this in, we got death threats. So it's going to be unpopular. People are going to be upset, but I think we need to be able to make the changes so that parking is available.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Mormon, and try and keep it PG, please.
Ooh.
I'm teasing you.
I'm going to say ditto to a lot of what my fellow council members have said so far. I do think further engagement with the business community as well as the neighbors. I know, the parking issue impacts the neighborhoods around as well. So I think that they really need to be part of the solution too. I totally want to be sensitive to the concerns about maintaining the customer base of our businesses, but I also agree with Sean. I've heard many anecdotes of people saying, I don't go to Old Town anymore because I can't find parking. So there are already potential customers that we don't have that I would, and I don't know what kind of study would bring forth that kind of data, but I would certainly think that there's both benefits there for us to be looking at. And I'm really also been thinking along the same lines with Councilmember Davis of doing some sort of trial. Maybe it's just on weekends when we know that we're at the super peak, or it's just in the evenings on the weekends or something like that, to just start very slowly and give it a trial with the business community and see what comes of that and what data we can collect. So those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Rupert.
A couple points. One is I completely agree with Mr. Marriott that we've got to be very protective of the business community, particularly in the off-peak hours when sales are already slim and the regular folks' expectations are that they're not going to have to be paying for parking if there's ample parking out there, right? So that leads to the second point. If we align our times with those times where people will fully expect to be charged, the peak times, I think it will reduce the anxiety associated with this. And really, our goal here is to move people out of spots and make the spots that are currently occupied by possibly the employees or other folks sticking around 3 or 4 hours. It will help the businesses because we'll be able to retain some of the customers we are attracting. So I think there are good ways of doing it, but we ought to be entering it with great caution, as Mr. Marriott suggests.
I echo those sentiments. I like that you've brought us just sort of plans for how we would engage the community to look at flexibility, focusing on those peak hours, probably not in the morning. I love the idea of the first 30 minutes or hour free, based off what the data tells us. I think that would be important for particularly our retailers, for those who want to run into Penzi Spices, get a few things run out. That would be wholly appropriate to be able to help those particular businesses. And so I'm generally in favor of moving forward with our next steps, working with the entire Old Town community and in particular our businesses. One idea from the meeting that was discussed was the ability to stay longer than 2 hours, which could also help service providers and or dining and shopping, people wanting to make more of a day, and then they pay more. And I think people would be very inclined to do that. And I agree with the sentiment that it will direct some people into the hub for the free parking, because I know every time I go to Old Town Westminster, I find the free lot and then I hoof it to where I'm going. So I know for a fact people will do that because I am one of those people. So with that, do you feel like you have the direction you need?
I believe I do.
All right.
Thank you
well,
very
then,
much.
no more questions or comments from council? All right. Thank you very much. We appreciate you, Mr. Fern. Ms. Patterson. That concludes our workshops for this evening. Ms. Haley, do you have any items for us?
Good evening, City Council. Just a reminder, we do not have a council meeting next week, so enjoy your break, and we'll see you on the 6th.
fifth Tuesday. Ms. Morris?
Nothing from me, Your Honor.
All right, with that, we stand adjourned.